is the UK Trade Association for Association for Interactive Media and Entertainment. And what we do is we represent a very broad industry of companies that are involved with supplying services to consumers that are interactive or entertaining, so that's quite a broad remit. That means that we have amongst our membership is broadcasters, charities, mobile operators, fixed line operators, aggregators, payment intermediaries, other financial payment companies, and a lot of the companies that are actually providing services directly mainly through the digital market to consumers. Which does mean we do cover a lot of PRS, and there's been probably the 90% of our activity over the last couple of years has been trying to reshape how pre-rent services are regulated in the UK. But we're not precious about PRS. So PRS goes poof and dies, and we have other payment mechanisms the day after. Then we won't be worried. The mobile network operators might be, but we won't be worried because the rest of our membership will benefit from the change in the evolution, which I think is actually we're at day number 5 of that evolution, probably that evolutionary step. So we have about 70 members. I'm the managing director. We have a great board which is made up from all of the various segments of the market we're representing. So that's enough about me. And then these are our sponsors. So you'll see Auction8, NetSize, Open Market, Impulse Pay, Engage, and AIME Mobile are in the aggregation and payment intermediary space. And then ITV, very, very strong supporter of AIME, does a lot of work with interactive services like X Factor, etc. And very strong support. And down here, monitoring compliance partners, which you will see out there with their stands. You can go and have a chat to them. In October the 1st, so I'm doing a little bit of cheating, October the 1st, we ran a specialised conference purely for the membership. So it's a closed environment, membership only, specialised conference. We call it the AIME Power 50 because it was the 50 companies providing their senior managers into the conference, listened to some very good speakers on the day, and those speakers covered a broad remit of mainly looking at the future and trying not to worry too much about the present, because the present in the UK is pretty bad at this moment in time, with network operators taking some sort of overzealous actions related to their payment scheme and trying to protect their consumer base and their reputation, mainly caused by some threats from Ofcom about how they handle consumers. So the whole thing's just snowballed over the summer period, which is that a mixed metaphor? Snowballing over a summer period? Can't have a snowball in summer. There. And we had some great speakers, including Mr. Lane over there, Anuj Khanna from Peak State Consulting, Tony Craddock, who's from the Emerging Payments Association that deals globally with all forms of new types of payments. So credit card, debit card, a little bit boring, but things like digital currencies and virtual currencies as part of their association. John Pinchbeck from Ticketing Consultancy, and you'll understand why we chose ticketing as one of the speakers. Nicholas Granholm from NetSize, also talking about ticketing experience in the transport arena. And another Nicholas called Nicholas Rao from Dentons, who's a lawyer, looking at e-commerce and payment services. And Roy Veller from Veller Ventures, just to keep the audience awake in the afternoon. And so what I've done is extracted most of the good stuff from their presentation and turned it into the top 10 game changers. So hopefully, if you bear with me. So the first one or number 10 on the usual chart countdown from 10 to 1 is, as Nick alluded to, is the smartphone and internet penetration. We all know it, but there's some astonishing figures. Is smartphone penetration is now virtually 2/3 of the global penetration of mobile devices across the world. So there's 3 billion active internet users, that's through all forms of devices, and 3.6 billion mobile users. In amongst those 3.6 billion mobile users, 1.7, half of them are social media users, so they must have smartphones. They must be active on the internet to be social media users. So huge penetration. And in terms of the web page views, While laptops and desktop computers are still dominant in the amount of access to the web, mobile is taking over quite extensively. So two times the access to the web from laptops and desktop computers than mobile, but the growth now is 31% year on year, increasing on mobile and declining 13%. So mobile is the big swing. Now, while you go, yes, so what? It actually has some significant meanings because of the way that mobile is constructed, the way that users interact with mobile. And the device split is at the moment globally 33% Apple, 30% Android, and the others like Windows Phone and standard feature phones, the old Nokias, etc., making up 30%. I know when it comes to 93, there's a few others odd ones in amongst that. Next, number 9 is the evolving consumer behaviour, and this is one that's absolutely significant. And again, research has shown that consumers are going off PRS and onto other things because they can get the same content for free. So why dial up and pay for a weather forecast if you can access it for free? Why find out a business telephone number if you want the business telephone number when you can access it now through Google for free? So a lot of free content on the internet has taken out a lot of the PRS services which were based around spontaneity. So the increasing access to the internet is also driving increasing retail presence. So retailers are rapidly trying to catch up with the evolution of consumers. This is physical and digital retailers. The evolution of consumers over to smartphones. The internet retailing as a whole is growing by $1 trillion globally in 3 months, with Western European growth 18 to 23% year on year, depending on which country. UK stands very high amongst that because the penetration of mobile internet, 3G and 4G across the UK is quite strong, giving virtually seamless access. So we are, we're not the highest shopper at 1600. We have the highest average shopping per annum of $1,600 per annum. So the UK consumer is very hot on the internet and using their smartphone for retailing. And as Nick said, PayPal is the dominant payment mechanism. You wouldn't believe it because you think PayPal just sits amongst credit card, debit card, and everything like that. But actually, out of 2 separate research, PayPal is the dominant player. Why they haven't exploited the charge to mobile category, I'm not sure. But I think there's some internal politics and different ways of working that stop that. One of the issues may be the margin that you make from mobile is not the margin you can make from a straight deduction from a bank account. So there might be that at play. And then separately, the estimated carrier billing market is $50 billion, but this is going to be, and it's going to be seen across Europe and probably across other countries, digital content and services only. So the ability to buy physical goods is going to be more and more restricted as years goes on by the payment entities who do not want the mobiles to take away the physical retailing side of their business. And they have some big influences as well. From the consumer's viewpoint, the smaller screen creates new challenges. So the consumer's access to the smartphone gives a very different view on the internet than the traditional 14-inch screen, which means now instead of going into a site where you've got some advertising wrapped around it, which your eyeball is learning to ignore, like the banner ad at the top and a couple of strips down the side, you're actually now becoming more and more exposed to digital advertising by advertising popping up and popping in front of and forcing you off what you were looking at and going off into places where you maybe didn't want to go, but the only way the publishers can get the advertising revenue is to actually expose you to advertising in a much more aggressive way than you would find on traditional laptops. The funding of content and services by advertisers is gradually changing. Not rapidly, but it's a gradual change because the ad inventory on a small screen is such that if you're not forcing your users off to take the advertising, your ad revenue drops, and your ability to provide free content drops. So the everything free, which has been around since the dawn of the internet, which in my eyes is about sort of 30 years ago, is gradually becoming a declining concept, which may mean that premium rate services, the ability to charge the mobile device for the content that you would normally get for free, is actually a potentially future opportunity. One of the things that's also come out as an evolution in consumers is, because consumers are now more digitally aware and internet aware, when they find something that is chargeable and they find they're not asked for their passwords, which you get with PayPal, you're asked for your 16-digit credit card number with credit and debit card. If you're not asked for those things, then they go, okay, what's happening here? Maybe it's free. And then they go and over-consume on the basis that the price they saw is a technical mistake, and they're actually getting content for free. And that leads to consumer complaints, the network operators, which leads to operators taking draconian action against the industries providing their content. So the concept of no password equals no bill is there in the mindset of consumers and needs to be overturned in a fairly well-educated way, so that consumers know you can charge your mobile account and you won't be asked for a password. Oh, sorry, there was one last point that came out. The consumer also sees the mobile operator, because the mobile operator bills the consumer, is being completely responsible for everything. So I get a crack in my screen on my iPhone, the mobile operator is responsible. If I drop it down the toilet, the mobile operator has to fix it. If I get a bill for a service I don't recognise, the mobile operator has to fix that. So the concept of the mobile operator nursemaiding the consumer is actually growing and growing and growing, with parents actually blaming the mobile operator for not providing them with enough education to take on parental responsibility. Now there's a bit of sarcasm in there. So inside the operator, there's quite an evolution in the operator. First of all, the term carrier billing undermines the value of the operator. So the carrier on the traditional telephony service is literally carrying that voice call through, and if there's a bill, a premium rate bill for that, the voice-based telephony provider will not talk to the consumer about what was on the bill. You just go, sorry, you've used some third-party services, off you go and talk to Phonepay Plus or whatever. In the mobile world, the operator is actually not seeing themselves as a payment processor, and that's why they're not behaving as a pure payment processor. They're seeing themselves first and foremost as being a heavy acquisition of consumers and then a heavy retainer of their consumers, and anything that gets in the way of that retention or that acquisition is potentially dangerous to them, so they will forsake premium rate revenue if they think it's going to lose their customer base. And with a highly competitive environment, it's already saturated in the UK. Consumers are just moving from one network operator to the other, so they're desperate to try and keep the consumer from moving. And because they sit on top of the food chain, they can very easily influence the happy state of the market to the very unhappy state of the market in a very, very short space of time, as we saw over the summer. The joined-up approach between network operators also means that you have both a positive and minus. So you can have joined-up approach goes the pay for it scheme, which is a common payment interface. It may not be perfect, but it's common, which is important for a merchant who wants to sell to every mobile consumer. But then when they sit in a room all together and start moaning about certain services, you can then have a bit of negative vibes building up and influencing the decision process. So there's a mobile operator up there, that's the food chain underneath, and the savannah is healthy, and the food chain are going, yes, we're quite happy until obviously you come down off your ledge and eat us, but okay, that's life. And there in the corner is Scar and his hyenas, ready to sort of take over this and completely decimate and destroy it. And being at the top of the food chain, you either have to be that nurturing type entity that makes sure that the only way you can be at the top of the food chain is have the food chain happy, great, you know, sun shining, etc. And this guy doesn't get that. And the mobile operators are currently in the Scar mentality. The guy's name is Scar, if anyone watched the film. So, moving on. Number 7, digital currencies and wallets. So digital currencies are at the moment available to 65% of the population, which is quite a huge figure. This is where the threat to PRS arises, because if you're going to pay for something and paying via your mobile account is difficult, then there are other currencies that will take over. And if you're a merchant trying to sell and selling via your mobile, via the pay for it scheme or carrier billing, whatever it's called, is difficult, then you would look to monetize via alternative mechanisms. And the only potential thing you're doing is ostracizing a certain young consumer set who don't have access to those digital currencies, but that's gradually diminishing as younger and younger consumers get access to internet-based currencies. Stored ID payment, which is what PayPal is stored ID, so I have my ID with PayPal. PayPal has in its secret coffers all my bank details, all my credit card details, which you know, hopefully they'll keep it nice and secret, and I can access that with a password. So username and password. That's what's made PayPal really successful, because the ease of access to my funds is secure, but it's easy. So the dominance of the market at the moment, and Amazon Payments this is research that was done on users who use digital payments, and Amazon Payments and PayPal actually came out both at 79%. Apple Passbook, which is gradually growing, will become Apple Wallet, or Apple Pay, 17%. And Google Wallet, surprisingly, it was at 40%, but I think this research was just states-based, where Google Wallet is quite dominant, but it's not yet sort of seen that approach across Europe. But in about 9 months' time, we will see the launch of Android Pay, which will have about 3 or 4 different applications underneath it that monetizes via Android into a wallet, a digital wallet and a physical wallet environment. And cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, their growth is actually suppressed by trust, because cryptocurrencies are very much associated with subversive transactions like drug dealing, etc. And so their growth, even though it's a great opportunity, is a bit suppressed. These not my sayings. These are people who have said things. It's a regulation that's Brussels. So PSD2 consumer contracts and Phonepay Plus all affecting the market at the moment. PSD2 is Payment Services Directive. PSD2 is very, very close to its Parliament vote. Now, PSD2 as a financial regulation affects the ability to charge via a telecoms account, because there is an exemption for telecoms operators, which was narrowed dramatically to almost the point where it would wipe off about £300 million for the UK market. And AIME and Phonepay Plus and another organisation called Mobile Broadband Group, plus the UK Treasury and a couple of members of Parliament, battled with Europe to actually open that back up again. We got to nearly open, not quite. But the exemption now remains for mobile operators. There is in there, because of the pressure from the financial regulators, the maximum transaction value and the maximum monthly value. But through the Italians wanted transport tickets, and we went, oh, good idea, let's have tickets. We managed to open up a digital ticket opportunity, which again I'll talk about tomorrow. Consumer contracts is another regulation which sits very much around Phonepay Plus's regulation. It asks for the same things, but asks in a different way. So there's a slight interpretation difference between consumer contracts regs and Phonepay Plus's regs, but we're sorting out those differences with the various regulators to come up with a common standard. Essentially, it defines what a merchant must do before transacting with a consumer, and what the consumer's rights are. And then Phonepay Plus's regulation, anyone who's sort of followed the history of Phonepay Plus will know that they have themselves gone into some very dark places in the past. They're not a well-liked regulator. Over the last couple of years, mainly through well, it was a combination of things. It was a very bad decision that they took, which was challenged in the courts. At the same time, we as a trade association were challenging them face to face and challenging the management on how the operation of the regulator behaves. They were writing their own P45s essentially, writing themselves into obscurity. And we worked with them over the last couple of years, and they're now in a much better place. And anyone who went to the forum last week, November 5th, will go, wow, this is a different regulator, collaborative, working with the industry. Still has the power to deal with miscreants, which is great because we don't want them in the industry, but working with the rest of the industry to try and stabilise it and build a reputation of the industry up, because it's a very viable payment mechanism. If blue chips want to come into premium rate as a payment mechanism for their services, so you would want them to know that they are not going to have their reputation tarnished in the blink of an eye. Digital publishing. This is the significant change, evolution in digital publishing. So consumers' consumption on a smaller screen means the ad inventory has completely dropped away. And consumers are showing signs that they are willing to drop, pay for product in exchange for non-intrusive advertising. So do not bother me with advertising. If you watch any YouTube, you'll be fed up with the strips that come across the front of YouTube. There is a move now to provide a payment mechanism that you can say, I want to be ad-free, and it's starting to evolve. The easiest way to be ad-free is to charge the consumption to your phone account. But it's early days. Okay, number 4, formulaic marketing. I don't know if you've seen it, sort of big headlines like this, which you go, oh, click on that, and then you lead to another page which has got another set of headlines, and you go, I wanted the story, and it's what's known as clickbait. And consumers are getting really fed up with it because it's peaking at the moment. Consumers are expressing absolute anger at it. It's rumoured to be in very rapid decline. It's currently, because consumers are being pushed towards chargeable services, which is why the clickbait is there, pushing towards chargeable services, you then feel that you, as a consumer, you've been misled, and so there's a consumer backlash occurring on clickbait. And then not forgetting voice services, so we are in Telemedia, and voice services is also very relevant. In the UK, it's a new lease of life for voice services because after 13 years of stagnation on pricing, Ofcom finally allowed an increase on premium rate voice calls up to £6 per call or £3.60 per minute, which means new services can come on board. There are some conditions and restrictions, but they're not onerous, and the maximum transaction value of the total call is £45. We're anticipating quite a lot of new services coming in. There's a lot of heavy marketing that's needed to encourage those services.
£6 drop call.
£6 drop call, yes. Yeah, £6 drop or £3.60 per minute, and you can combine those two as well, so £6 drop and £3.60. So if you've just been pulled over by the police for doing 90 miles an hour on a 30 mile an hour limit, and you want to phone a solicitor, no, phone a solicitor. £6. It might cost you £60 to get some advice, but you might get away with your £150 fine. Whatever. But those are the sort of services, and a lot of counselling services. There's a lot of different forms of counselling services are viable because that's what that income is what people need in order to provide those services at the end of the phone line. So mainly professional services anticipated. Then ticketing. I have to get excited about this because I was the instigator of the ticketing concept in the Payment Services Directive. So, entertainment tickets, now permissible under PSD2, which will come in at the end of 2017. We're working with the Treasury to say, can we have some early starters on ticketing? Currently, and this is why we had a guy from the ticketing consultancy give us a speech, 40% of all UK tickets to all events like music and sports and cinemas, etc., are unsold. There's a caveat: some of them would never be sold. Oh look, right. Did we ticket for this? Yeah, some of it would never be sold because the event is crap. You know, you will never sell it except for a tramp who wants a dry spot for a two-hour session, and will probably be happy to pay for £1. It's a great opportunity for spontaneous consumption through push marketing to dump what's known as distressed stock. And some of the distressed stock can give up to a 30% commission on the resale value. So if you sell it for £1, you're only going to get 30p. But if you fill a cinema for £1 a seat, you know, the cinema's going to be very happy because it's sell the popcorn. They've already run the film, and you'll get you know, 230p, which is quite good for a bit of push marketing. The nice thing, the opportunity, is the ticketing environment is actually technologically poor. It makes it feel okay when you're up there buying your tickets to the West End show, but it's actually quite poor, and that means the premium race guys who are technologically savvy and very, very fleet of foot could jump in there and make quite a killing out of taking advantage of that gap in technology. Right. And travel, again permissible under PSD2, it equates in regulation to buses, trains, car parks and taxis, or anything that's associated with travel. Mustn't end up in a physical good, but a car park is not a physical good because you can't take it away, it's a service. And same with taxi. A taxi is a service which got Vodafone worrying for quite some time because they actually had a taxi service which you could charge your mobile for, and then somebody told them it was a physical good, which it isn't. It's a difficult market to enter because the people who provide travel services are very, very old school, year-long sales cycle discussions, etc. And you're also competing in the more advanced markets with contactless cards and prepayment cards like Oyster. Okay. And the final, number one, is a new term which has come into the Maguire alphabet called Uberisation. And basically what Uberisation is, it means doing small things well. So rather than doing big things badly, do small things well. Now Uber, I mean everyone knows Uber. What Uber has done is say, look, okay, we've got taxis, we've got people who want taxis, we've got payment mechanisms for those taxis. What can we do to make that really great for a consumer? Because a consumer can pick up the phone, dial a taxi, have it arriving on the door, and pay the taxi driver when he gets to the end. So what they did is they created this screenshots from a New York one, but they're also operational in London. So essentially, you created a mapping system. It showed you where the nearest taxi was, how long it's going to take to get to you. You can pay during your time inside the app, and you can rate the taxi at the end of the journey, and you get your digital receipts as well. So it's really looking backwards, saying what does the consumer want, and creating an environment around that. It's called Uberisation. And you might see more of it coming up. And that's me. And hopefully that was exciting.